You are listening to the Getting Lucky Mixed Martial Arts Podcast. I am your host, Lucky Robert Curtis. This show is brought to you by WhatCulture.com. Joining me to talk about the upcoming UFC on FX card, Belfort versus Bisping, is English Thom Burton.
What up, homies?
Hello.
Oh, I was hoping you wouldn't do that.
Nope, that's gonna go.
I tried to throw you off.
Yep. That was the worst. I don't know if that was supposed to be a hip-hop urban street accent,
yeah.
But your rep is suffering. Your pimp hand is weak, my man.
I know.
Stick to Chim Chimney.
I ain't no player. I'll just go back to my Charles Dickens novel.
My Charles Dickens novel. So we actually did a preview show last week for Strikeforce, but due to some technical issues, we didn't actually end up getting to publish and push out our review show. So just very quickly, just on the main card, Jacare defeated Ed Herman in extremely one-sided, on the feet and on the ground, first-round submission. Gegard Mousasi defeated Mike Kyle in a first-round rear naked choke. Gegard's striking did not look as polished as we wanted. Josh Barnett completely ran over Nandor with a first-round submission. Daniel Cormier toyed with Dion Staring with a second-round TKO. And Tarek Safadine obliterated Nate Marquardt's leg with about 1,000 leg kicks for a unanimous decision and the final Strikeforce welterweight champion, concluding the Strikeforce promotion as a whole. Tom, any thoughts on that?
Just to also bring up, I believe the UFC brought up a list of fighters that are now being brought in, and pretty much most of them were definite. I mean, Daniel Cormier, champions, Gilbert Melendez, Luke Rockhold, the newly crowned Derek Safadine is also been signed, but also Nate Marquardt, even though he had a pretty bad performance in his last fight, he was still able to get that contract. The only person that missing was Josh Barnett, which that's a big omission. Yeah, which I'm not surprised though, because I can understand why the UFC is probably not wanting to sign him.
I don't know if it's so much that they don't want to sign him as they may be, his contract negotiations may be extended.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I do suspect he'll come over. But to your point, a lot of the high-name talent in Strikeforce already have fights lined up. I believe Melendez is scheduled to go straight off onto Benson Henderson.
Yeah.
And who was it?
Frank Mir's fighting Daniel Cormier.
Yeah, and then Frank Mir and Cormier are actually on the both card. I believe UFC on Fox 7 on April 19th, if I remember correctly. April 19th, yeah. April 20th. So we bid you adieu, Strikeforce. Thanks for the memories, and you probably should have folded up doors 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Shall we talk about our upcoming card, UFC on FX, Belfort versus Bisping?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. The first fight, the only fight on Facebook, is one that I'm actually pretty excited about. Because Francisco Trinaldo... Now, here's the thing about these Brazilians. You look them up on their records, and they've got one name. You know, Francisco Trinaldo. That's the name, their official name. But nobody knows them as that. This guy, Francisco Trinaldo, is actually Massaranduba from the Ultimate Fighter Brazil Season 1. And if you remember, Massaranduba was a freak on the ground. When he got into the house for that first fight, the ground and pound he put on him reminded me of Mark Munoz.
Oh, yeah.
He faces off against CJ Keith. What do you think about this fight?
I remember that fight was just scary in that tough fight. I mean, a lot of those Brazilian fighters are just monsters. This guy, CJ Keith, I mean, he's only had one loss in his career, but I think Francisco Trinaldo... I can never pronounce these foreign names. I'm terrible. Francisco Trinaldo.
Francisco Trinaldo.
Yeah.
Or you can want, if you just call it his... Unfortunately, his nickname is actually harder than his real name, Massaranduba.
Exactly. So I'm just going to call him Francisco then, because I can say
Alrighty.
that. Just Francisco. Francisco, I think, is probably going to take this fight easily, and I think it's because he's just fought the tougher composition, and he's already had 2 UFC fights this far. So I'm going to go for Francisco, and I believe I'm going to guess that you are going to continue with your Wikipedia theory.
Well, I do think that in this particular situation, the Wikipedia theory stands up very strongly. And that is that if a fighter doesn't have a Wikipedia page, you can assume that he's going to lose. CJ Keith does only have one loss, but it was his first and only fight in the UFC, and he lost to Ramzi Najim.
Yeah.
Which I don't think Ramzi Najim's on the caliber of Massaranduba. Massaranduba is a lightweight, and he fought the tough Brazil tourney as a middleweight, and that's basically how I think he lost to Bodao, because Bodao is a massive middleweight. Both of these guys are coming off of losses, but Massaranduba's loss was to Gleison Tebow, which is a much higher caliber opponent. I believe Massaranduba destroys CJ Keith, because CJ Keith has no Wikipedia page. Hello, Governor. That's the only Facebook prelim. Let's move to the Fuel TV prelims. We have a light heavyweight bout. Wagner Prado, 8-1-1, coming off of a loss, versus Ildemar Alcantara, 17-5, with a 7-fight win streak.
Wagner Prado, you got a guy with the name Wagner. How can you not come out to Ride of the Valkyries? I mean,
that's true.
I mean, if he doesn't, I would hope that Wotan appears out of the sky and drags his ass off to Norse hell.
They should literally get him on a chariot being pulled by the ring girls, and he has the opera helmet with the feathers on the side. I think the only thing you really need to know about this fight is that despite Alcantara's very nice record, 17-5 with a 7-fight win streak, he's a replacement fighter coming in, I believe, on January 8th. So he's had 2 weeks to prepare. And he's a natural middleweight, and he's fighting now at light heavy for this fight.
Yeah.
Prado is a brawler. He's got great powers. 7 of his 8 wins are by KOs. I kind of see this going in one direction.
And you're going to go with Wagner?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Wagner. I think Ildemar Alcantara has a future in the UFC, but not at light heavyweight.
No. I think I'm going to have to agree with you. I think Wagner is a finisher, and this card was just built for finishes, so that's what I'm going to go with.
Fairly easy. The next fight is a bantamweight. This one, I think, is going to be one of the best fights of the night. Yuri Alcantara, I don't know if that's any relation to Ildemar Alcantara, 27-4, coming off of a loss, versus Pedro Nobre, 14-1-2, with a 2-fight win streak. Yuri Alcantara was a legit, serious contender, riding a 13-fight win streak before he picked up a unanimous decision loss to Hakon Diaz, and Hakon Diaz is 21-1. So that's nothing to be ashamed of. I think Yuri Alcantara is very exciting. But Pedro Nobre, he's got serious power, 14 wins, 9 KOs, but this is his promotional debut. What do you think?
I think Pedro was fighting when he was a tough competitor. He wasn't fighting at his natural weight class. He was fighting at featherweight, and this fight, I believe, will be contested. I think it's in bantamweight. Not sure, but I think we're going to see a lot better fighter from Pedro. But then again, like you said, Yuri was riding
13-fight win streak.
13-fight win streak. I think he's just the better fighter, the more experienced, and I think he's going to take it.
I agree. One of the things I want to point out about Yuri Alcantara is that he has an extremely balanced record. He's a finisher. 27 wins, 23 of those were finished, 11 by knockout, 12 by submission. Virtually identical. He's also, like you said, this will be his 4th fight in the UFC. He fought in the WEC. I think he's a class above Pedro. But Pedro, I think, is one of those guys we need to keep a look on, to have a butcher's, for those Cockney people out there. Because I think he could actually, there could be a chance of an upset here. Actually, I'm pegging the next fight as a potential upset. But I think Pedro Nobre definitely has his opportunity here. And if he takes a win over Yuri Alcantara, then he's legit. Next fight is a lightweight fight versus Edson Barbosa. He's 10-1 after his wheel kick fight of the year, or KO of the year knockout. He actually came up with a loss against Jamie Varner. He's fighting promotional newcomer Lucas Martins, who is 12-0.
Well, unfortunately for Edson Barboza, his hype train kind of got derailed there in his last fight. And it was just right after that huge knockout victory of Terry Etam as well. And I'm not going to call it a spinning wheel kick, because I think a spinning wheel kick looks like a cartwheel. I think it was a spinning heel kick. But like you said, Edson Barboza's just trying to pick up his career again, and he's fighting a guy, an undefeated Brazilian. I think Edson Barboza is probably the guy who I'd put my money on, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's an upset, because apparently this guy is legit.
Yes, I think he is. I haven't gotten to see him fight, but he's a Shooterbox fighter. He's only 24. He's got 8 KOs, and like I said before, he's 12-0. You don't know if this guy's built up by fighting lesser competition in Brazil, or if he's actually going to be good. My bet is that this is fight of the night, if not KO of the night, from either fighter.
Yeah, I'm expecting a bonus as well.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. This is a bonus fight. I'm very excited to see Lucas Martins and see what he can do. And of course, Edson Barboza needs a nice performance to rebound from his thrashing to Jamie Varner. Another fight with great potential. Diego Nunes, 18-3 on a one-fight win streak versus Nick Lentz, 22-5-2 with 1 no contest, also coming off of a win. What do you think about Nunes?
Nunes, who's sometimes called Mini Vitor, is kind of this explosive fighter, but he can't really ever get a win streak going. He's kind of been very inconsistent over these past years, fighting in the WEC and making the transition to the UFC. He's fighting a guy in Nick Lentz who's a lay and prayer, but doesn't want to admit it and gets pissed off when he gets laid and prayed. If you remember that. And I think this could be a problem for Diego Nunes, because I think he could have problems with wrestlers, like most Brazilians who don't have that training in wrestling.
Yes. I think Diego Nunes, he's a kickboxer, but he's super athletic, and he's got, as a Brazilian, of course, he's got a good ground game. These are where his losses come from. He's 18-3. LC Davis has a huge record, and that was back in 2009. So Diego Nunes was still a youngster. Then he fought Kenny Florian in 2011, and then he fought Dennis Seaver. Now, Dennis Seaver at featherweight is a monster. So I don't think those losses really point to Nunes not being ready at this level. In my opinion, he'll win this fight. I think he'll beat Nick Lentz. Although Nick Lentz, prior to dropping down to featherweight, he's undefeated at featherweight, i.e. he fought once. At lightweight, if you don't take his loss that was overturned and made into, I believe, a DQ or no contest, he was actually on a 3-fight losing streak at lightweight.
Yeah.
So I think Diego Nunes is clearly the superior athlete, the superior fighter, if, like you said, he just doesn't get countered with the wrestling blanket.
Yeah. That's what I'm worried about in this fight, and I think that could be the decider.
Yeah, there are a couple of fighters. I believe it's in the main card that I think a particularly exciting fighter is going to be blanketed. We'll get to that here in a second. Next fight, middleweight, Ronnie Marks, or probably Honey Marks, 13-1, 6-fight win streak versus undefeated 8-0, Andrew Craig. Now, you remember Andrew Craig was a last-minute replacement for an injured fighter, came in and fought Kyle Noakes. Got dominated in round 1, but then surprisingly in round 2 and 3, he turned it on and won. Then he fought Rafael Natal. I always want to say Nadal, and KO'd him with a head kick. This guy came out of nowhere as a late-minute replacement. He has to be a fan favorite as a result of that. Just a regular guy doing his thing in a small promotion, gets pulled up. Now he's on a 2-fight UFC winning streak. What do you think of this fight?
He's going to be facing his opponent, Ronnie Marks, who's a Nueva União fighter, I believe, and that's a very good camp, and I expect some very good things from this fighter. But I think Andrew Craig has been on a tear, and I think he's just going to continue with his win streak.
Ronnie Marks, his last win was over Aaron Simpson, who is a legit middleweight. I believe he got dropped in the first round, but then recovered and won rounds 2 and 3. Yeah. I think the happy story, the storybook tale of Andrew Craig ends with this fight. I don't think he's cut from the UFC, but I do think he gets the loss from Ronnie Marks. Honey Marks.
Yeah. It's a tough fight to call.
Yeah, it is. You never know. But I think with the Brazil crowd and everything, but who knows? Andrew Craig, maybe that guy just has a magic feather shoved up his butt. You're a football fan, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
I'm a football fan. In fact, I've played the beautiful game for going on 25 years. So it would be thus very exciting for two football fans to watch Neymar fight. And of course I'm talking about Godofredo Castro, a.k.a. Pepe, the man that looks exactly like Neymar. He's 8-1. He's coming off of a loss. He's fighting fellow Brazilian Milton Vieira, kind of a journeyman, 13-7-2. Last fight was a draw.
I love Godofredo's name. It's so cool. It's literally something out of a FIFA World Cup team players. He's had a pretty good number of wins as well. Just the one loss, dropping that UFC 147 fight. I mean, it could be that he's just entered into the UFC too early in his career. I mean, he's only had 8 fights before then.
Well, that fight was actually the Tough Brazil final with Rony Jason. And Rony Jason, he's kind of an axe murderer. He's got a little. He looks like a Brazilian Charles Manson. So I can understand Pepe picking up a loss there because I think Rony Jason's style matches up very nicely with the flair and pure athleticism of Pepe. I have to say that I think Vieira, who's almost purely a grappler, offers no threat, I think, anywhere else. I think he's going to get outpointed.
Yeah, I mean, that's generally a problem with these one-dimensional Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighters as well. They just don't have anything else to work with their game. They can't get the takedowns, and they just get outstruck on the feet. I mean, like I said, the only problem I do have with Godofredo is his experience. He went straight from these small regional promotions in Brazil and then straight to the UFC. Generally, when I look at these fighters' records, I see generally Brazilian fighters come from the Jungle Fights promotion, which is the kind of like the Bellator of Brazil, and it's a brilliant feeder organization for UFC fighters. I believe Eric Silva was a huge prospect who came from there, and he gave John Fitch probably his toughest fight to date.
I think Pepe, being only 25 and loaded with athleticism, I think this guy actually could have a really, really nice future in the UFC. Probably a title shot or two, if not. For him, let's face it, if he's going to take out Aldo or Edgar, he's got to grow a lot. But I mean, really, he's not even close to his prime yet. His prime is going to be anywhere from 30, 32. And he's got 5 to 7 years to hit that. I really like Godofredo Pepe, even though I'm not that big of a Neymar fan. I think he takes this by decision.
Okay, I can agree with you on that. I think he's probably going to beat Milton Vieira, but I think he's going to struggle with the American fighters in the UFC.
Yeah, he'll probably run into a high-level wrestler and just get grounded and held down. But for this fight, Neymar, goal! Let's talk about the main card. We've got Thiago Tavares, 17-4-1 on a 2-fight winning streak, versus, secretly, the best prospect in the lightweight division, Khabib Nurmagomedov. I'm going to try that again. Nurmagomedov. I practiced this so many times before the show. Nurmagomedov.
Oh.
Nurmagomedov. That's probably not even close. I'm sure
Have
people...
Have you seen his full name? It's Khabib Abdullah-Petrovich Nurmagomedov. It is insane.
I'm sure we've got some Russian listeners. So let us know how messed up we are with this guy's name, would you please? Oh my God! I just saw his last name. It's Abdullah Manapovich. Oh my gosh! I think I actually said that better than the guy's last name. This guy's 18-0, and he's one of these guys that comes from this sick wrestling background. Guys like Ruslan Khabilov that won via the triple suplex against Vince Pichel. That still breaks my heart. Tavares, longtime UFC veteran. He's kind of a middle of the pack guy. He's 7-5-1 in the UFC. He's exciting. He's gotten lots of bonuses. Khabib, as you'd expect, he's a sambo guy with lots of power, very balanced finishing. I don't see any way Tavares wins this fight.
Yeah, I think Khabib is just going to ragdoll him all over the cage. I mean, this guy is literally, if you come from Eastern Europe and you're a Sambo champion, an Army Hand to Fight champion, a Nago grappling world champion, and Pankration, I mean, this guy is like a multi-martial artist champion in every single form of Eastern European martial arts.
And
I mean,
a black belt in judo. And he's only 24.
This guy is insane. And he's working with American wrestlers as well. He trains in the US.
AKA, that's probably the best wrestling camp in the United States.
Yeah, they need to change their name.
They really do. Can we call it the AWA?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's call it that.
So you're with Khabib. Do you think he finishes Tavares?
Yeah, I think he does. I think Tavares is he's just going to be shocked at how powerful Khabib is. He's just going to be in pure shock the whole fight.
Yeah, I like Khabib. I think this propels him into top 10 type of competition. No more of the middle of the pack guys. I think this makes him in the conversation. He's still probably 2 to 3 fights away from getting a shot. Shall we talk about the heavyweights? Another feel-good story here. Gabriel Gonzaga got cut from the UFC. Probably because he lost to Brendan Schaub, the hybrid. But on late notice, he was asked to come back. Every time I get out, they pull me back in. And he subbed Oliveira. So now he has actually earned his way back into the UFC. So congratulations, Gonzaga. They're giving you Ben Rothwell. Gonzaga is 13-6, coming off of a 2-fight win streak. Ben Rothwell has a monster record of 32 wins and 8 losses. He's coming off of a win. Rothwell, at high-level competition, once you got him out of the IFL, he's kind of a 500 fighter in the UFC and I believe Affliction. It's sad to say this about a UFC fighter, but he's actually now dedicated to training. He's now trimmer, he's slimmer. Hopefully he doesn't get popped for steroids or something like a trimmer and slimmer Joey Beltran. This is an interesting fight, particularly since Gonzaga is now returning back to his submissions after he fell in love with his striking by ending Kokrop's career with a head kick, the irony of which is unending. What do you think of this fight? I think it's actually going to be a really close fight.
Yeah, I think this could be a really close fight, and it's a really good fight for Gonzaga as well, because Ben Rothwell is generally... He's in the gatekeeper area of the heavyweight division, so, I mean, if he beats Ben Rothwell, we could be looking at a top 10 opponent to Gabriel Gonzaga. And I really do hope that Gonzaga fights smart as well. Remember, you're a jiu-jitsu fighter. Yes, you knocked out Krokop, but it was probably the luckiest head kick in mixed martial arts history. The technique which it was thrown was just poor. It's literally like he was going to fall on his head when he landed. Please stick to your jiu-jitsu, Gonzaga.
You know, I like that analogy of Ben Rothwell being a gatekeeper. Nogueira Big Nog is the gatekeeper to a championship shot.
Yeah.
Ben Rothwell is the gatekeeper to the top 10. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. I agree. I would say Ben Rothwell and Czech Congo.
Oh, I have such a low opinion of Czech Congo. He's the worst striker I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. In
any promotion at any weight class. To say he is a kickboxer or Muay Thai guy, and then to see him do what he does, he should be in movies. He's got a great body for movies. I don't think he's anything as a fighter. I want Gonzaga to win too. I want him to take down Ben Rothwell and sub him. I don't know why. Maybe it's just a personal thing for Gonzaga. Or maybe it's because Ben Rothwell has been 50 pounds overweight his entire career.
Yeah.
The next fight, Daniel Sarafian, who should have fought in the Ultimate Fighter Brazil final but got injured, is 7-2. He's got a 4-fight win streak, and he's facing off against CB Dollaway. CB Dollaway is 12-4, coming off of a win. CB Dollaway makes it very hard for a pro wrestling guy like myself. And when I say pro wrestling, I don't mean WWE. I mean a guy that likes wrestling. He makes it very hard for a guy like myself to defend grappling, to defend wrestling. Yeah. That's not lay and pray. What do you think about this fight?
I remember CB Dollaway is probably Mitchell's most hated fighter in the UFC, and you can actually see where he got the name the Doberman from, because he likes to doggy style it on his opponents, because it's
leg hump.
Yeah, leg hump, all the canine sexual analogies you want. It's just ridiculous, this guy. And he's a guy that I hate as well. I hate to watch, and I really hope that he doesn't derail Daniel Sarafian's career, because like we said before in this podcast, wrestlers generally are the bane of Brazilian fighters.
So CB Dollaway is coming off of a win, but that win is against Jason Mayhem Miller, which is arguably one of the worst fights in the UFC's history. I think it's only marginally better than that boxer that went in with one hand free and one hand wearing a boxing glove. Like, that's how bad that fight was. But I'm actually saying CB Dollaway is going to win this fight because Daniel Sarafian, by the way, I believe he's Armenian, but he's born in Brazil. Sarafian sounds like an Armenian name. His two losses are to Whitehead and Padilla, and they're both high-caliber wrestlers. CB Dollaway is an Arizona State wrestler, and Arizona State, much like Oklahoma State, is a factory for MMA champions. Guys like Cain Velasquez, John Moraga, a huge amount of fighters come out of Arizona State. I think CB Dollaway blankets Sarafian for the entire fight and picks up a decision.
I agree completely. I think the wrestling factor is a huge point of this fight, and I think it's going to decide it.
I think the Brazilians are absolutely going to be going crazy, bonkers, angry, but I think CB Dollaway decisions him. Now, I know you're English.
Yep.
And I know that you're probably going to be biased towards this next fight.
Being
that this is basically the great white hope of the United Kingdom. This is your best fighter, and perhaps your best fighter ever. I'm, of course, talking about Michael the Count Bisping. He's facing off against Vitor Belfort. Michael's Bisping's record, 23-4, coming off of a win. I believe it was Brian Stan. Vitor Belfort, 21-10, coming off of 2 wins. All right, so let's hear about Michael Bisping.
Michael Bisping is generally, I'd agree, he's probably the most successful fighter to come out of the UK, and that's just because of how well-rounded he is. I mean, he was at a point out wrestling Chael Sonnen.
Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, he was out wrestling Chael Sonnen for one round, and you don't agree?
Listen, sprawling for 30 seconds is not out wrestling.
He had him against the cage. His clinch work was just better.
Listen, I admit that Bisping is a very technical striker with some of the best footwork in the middleweights. But to say he's well-rounded, that he's got anything to offer against elite grapplers, I think is being
I was
ludicrous.
talking about British fighters.
Okay, for a British fighter, he's amazingly well-rounded.
Exactly, my point. I mean, I'm not saying he's an NCAA wrestler, no.
All right, I tip my bowler hat to you. Keep going.
Okay. The only problem that I have with Bisping is he has absolutely no power in those hands.
Yes.
And that's because he doesn't commit to his punches. He's a technical striker that just tries to win on points and just try to coast his way to victory. And that could be a problem with a guy like a finisher like Vitor Belfort. And it's also another weakness that Bisping has is he doesn't do well when his opponent rushes him. He completely freezes up and they tag him on the chin and he goes to sleep. And I believe we saw that with Vanderlei Silva in Australia as well. He did it to him twice in that fight, and I think Vitor is just going to do the same in this fight.
You know, I absolutely agree with you about Bisping and his power, and he's actually addressed this, and he's tried to make changes in the way he throws, because a lot of times he emphasizes speed and footwork over actual damage. So he tries to pop, and get out, and a lot of times he's pulling his punches back before he can snap them. So he doesn't have a lot of power, particularly in his technique. And I'm wondering what you said about him doing when he retreats from aggression, that he retreats straight back. I actually talked to Brad Scott yesterday, who was the TUF finalist for the TUF Smashes welterweight. And he admitted that that's why he lost his fight against Robert Whittaker, and Whittaker's got a karate background. So a lot of that forward attack Brad Scott in the first round just went straight back. And he was, I asked him, well, did you think about circling off or rolling? He's like, yeah, as soon as I got back to my dressing room, I knew exactly what I should have done. And I'm wondering if that's a thing with British fighters, because Bisping seems to do the same thing to a lesser degree, but he still seems to do it like you said.
Yeah, I think it's that boxing background. We like to plant our feet and just use head movement rather than actually kickboxing.
Maybe it's also because in boxing or the bare knuckle background that a lot of British fighters seem to come from, there isn't that straightforward assault. You know what I mean? It's more like standing, weaving, and ducking in the pocket rather than really that hyper aggressive. And if that's the case, then he's going to have a problem with Vitor, because Vitor is one of those. At least he's shown it in the past. Hyper-aggressive forward-attacking fighters. That's what he did to Vanderlei, the other super hyper-aggressive Brazilian fighter. I have a confession to make about Vitor. I have been pretty down on him lately because I thought of him as being way past his prime. But then I went and looked at his record. His last 4 losses were to John Jones, Anderson Silva, both of those were finishes, Hendo, and Overeem. And I think sprinkled in there, he's got like 7, 8, or 9 wins. I don't know if I'm being fair to Vitor, because those names on that list are insane.
Yeah.
So is Vitor, in a sense, having a career renaissance, but kind of secretly so?
Well, we believe that he had a career renaissance after Affliction, and he was just about to fight Anderson Silva. But he just hasn't done well against the top-ranked fighters.
Let's be fair. And when we say he hasn't fared well against top-ranked fighters, particularly against Jones and Silva, no one has fared well. No one. And I admit, he did not look very good against Silva, taking that front snap kick in the first round. But Silva makes everyone look bad. And John Jones, I mean, Jesus, John Jones is a monster light heavyweight. And now that Vitor's not on the sauce anymore, Vitor's small. So I don't know if are we being fair to Vitor?
Yeah, I think, well, I've never had a problem with this. I think it's just you confessing. I mean, Vitor, I think he just kind of lost his skill set. He was a Carlson Gracie black belt, but we never really saw it. And it wasn't recently in the John Jones fight where he almost got that armbar that we started to see his jiu-jitsu come back after training with the Blackzilians, and I believe Mario Sperry, who's a very good jiu-jitsu coach. Former Brazilian top team fighter. So
just check out some of these names of recent people that he's beaten. Anthony Rumble Johnson, and Rumble Johnson did come in at 300 pounds.
Yeah.
Yoshihiro Akiyama finished first round. Rich Franklin finished first round. Matt Lindland finished first round.
Well, that was expected. Matt Lindland's got no chin.
Terry Martin finished. I mean, I'm actually thinking. See, this is the thing with Vitor, is he was roided and he had extreme personal problems, like his sister being kidnapped and murdered. So he went through a period of his career where he lost it. When he fought Chuck Liddell, he was 10-2. Fast forward to Cage Rage 21, he's 14-8. He had an extreme. I mean, and plus he's fighting Alistair Overeem. And guys like Randy Couture and Tito. Yeah, all these massive light heavies and heavyweights. Again, applaud him for his courage and his fearlessness, but he's not really protecting his record. I think I'm going to pick an upset here. At least, let me put it a different way. I'm going to pick Vitor and upset you. I don't know if Vitor is the betting favorite or not, but I think Vitor actually surprises some people. If he shows up to this fight healthy, which is, even money, I think he takes Bisping.
Yeah, I think Vitor is actually the underdog in this fight because generally people have looked at his record and just gone, Well, Michael Bisping, he generally was at number 1 contendership before losing to Chael Sonnen, and then picked up another top 10 victory over Brian Stann. A win over Vitor could possibly push him into title shot, and it's between him, Chris Weidman, and the new UFC entry in former Strikeforce middleweight champion Luke Rockhold. And a win over Vitor could possibly give him his fight against Anderson Silva, which he's been looking for the past 2 years.
I believe Dana White has confirmed that if Bisping wins, he gets Anderson. Which, British or no British, you can't say that he's got a chance, right?
No chance.
If Vitor wins, I don't believe he gets Anderson again. We probably go to Weidman. What I want to see is the guy that's not in this conversation, and that's Lombard. I think Lombard is better than both of these fighters. I'm going to be a bit biased, but you're biased for Michael Bisping, so I'm fine with that.
I'm not biased for Michael Bisping. I don't actually like Michael Bisping. I don't know where you got this from.
But he's British, my lovely.
Yeah, he's also an asshole, and he's a mank. And he has to have subtitles every time he speaks.
But you cheer for Man U, right? So you have to...
Yeah, but Man U aren't really a Manchester team, because most of the people in Manchester hate Manchester United.
What do you think? What do you think will be the fight of the night? Do you think it'll be Bisping Belfort just because it's the main?
No, I'm generally Michael Bisping's not a fight of the night fighter for me. I think I'm probably gonna go for Godofredo or Yuri Alcantara versus Pedro Nobre.
I'm going to go Edson Barboza versus Lucas Martins. That may not be the fight of the night, but my prediction is it'll be the most worthy fight of the night. Be sure to check out, I believe Bellator has an event tonight or tomorrow, depending on when you listen to this. Some big fights on there. Other than that, English Tom and I will be back to give you the review show of the UFC on FX card next week. On behalf of English Tom,
it's a goodbye from me.
Cheerio, and that's a goodbye from me as well. See you next time.